Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you've had a great week. Today we'll be reading chapters 17, 18, 19, and 20 of 2 Samuel. If you remember, Absalom, one of David's sons, has amassed himself an army of Israelite men. He's about to go to battle against his father, King David, and he is currently residing in Jerusalem. King David and his men have fled. But King David sent a friend of his back to kind of be like a double agent almost, to say to Absalom, I'm here to serve you. I served your father, now I want to serve you. But in reality, what he's going to do is he's going to be feeding information through to others that will get to King David. All right, so here we go, chapter 17. Ahithophel went on to say to Absalom, Please let me choose 12,000 men and be off in pursuit of David tonight. If I come upon him when he is weary and discouraged, I shall cause him panic. When all the people with him flee, I shall strike down the king alone. Then I can bring back the rest of the people to you, as a bride returns to her husband. It is the death of only one man you are seeking. Then all the people will be at peace. This plan was agreeable to Absalom and to the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said, Now call Hushai, the Archite, also, that's David's friend. Let us hear what he, too, has to say. When Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom said to him, This is what Ahithophel proposed. Shall we follow his proposal? If not, speak up. Hushai replied to Absalom, This time Ahithophel has not given good counsel. And he went on to say, You know that your father and his men are warriors, and that they are as fierce as a bear in the wild robbed of her cubs. Moreover, since your father is skilled in warfare, he will not spend the night with the people. Even now he lies hidden in one of the caves or in some other place. And if some of our soldiers should fall at the first attack, whoever hears of it will say, Absalom's followers have been slaughtered. Then even the brave man with the heart of a lion will lose courage. For all Israel knows that your father is a warrior, and that those who are with him are brave. This is what I counsel. Let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, who are as numerous as the sands by the sea, be called up for combat, and go with them yourself. We can then attack him wherever we find him, settling down upon him as dew alights on the ground. None shall survive, neither he nor any of his followers. And if he retires into a city, all Israel shall bring ropes to that city and can drag it to the gorge, so that not even a pebble of it can be found. Then Absalom and all of the Israelites pronounced the counsel of Hushai the Archite better than that of Ahithophel. For the Lord had decided to undo Ahithophel's good counsel, in order thus to bring Absalom to ruin. Then Hushai said to the priests of Zadok and Abiathar, This is the counsel Ahithophel gave Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I counseled. So send a warning to David immediately, not to spend the night at the fords near the desert, but to cross over without fail. Otherwise the king and all the people with him will be destroyed. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at Enrogel, since they could not risk being seen entering the city. A maidservant was to come with information for them, and they in turn were to go to report to King David. But an attendant saw them and informed Absalom. They sped on their way and reached the house of a man in Bahurim, who had a cistern in his courtyard. They let themselves down into this, and the housewife took the cover and spread it over the cistern, strewing ground grain on the cover so that nothing could be noticed. When Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they asked, Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman replied, They went by a short while ago toward the water. They searched but found no one, and so returned to Jerusalem. As soon as they left, Ahimaaz and Jonathan came out of the cistern, and they went to inform King David. They said to him, Leave, cross the water at once, for Ahithophel has given the following counsel in regard to you. So David and all his people moved on and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak there was no one left who had not crossed. When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not acted upon, he saddled his donkey and departed, going to his home in his own city. Then, having left orders concerning his family, he hanged himself, and he died and was buried in his father's tomb. Now David had gone to Mahanaim, when Absalom crossed the Jordan, accompanied by all the Israelites. Absalom had put Amasa in command of the army in Joab's place. Amasa was the son of an Ishmaelite named Ithara, who had married Abigail, daughter of Jesse and sister of Joab's mother, Zeruiah. Israel and Absalom encamped in the territory of Gilead. When David came to Menahem, Shobi, son of Nahash, from Rabbah of the Ammonites, Machir, son of Amiel, from Lodabar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rogelim, brought couches, coverlets, basins, and earthenware, as well as wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain, beans, lentils, honey, butter, and cheese from the flocks and herds for David and those who were with him to eat. For they said, "The people have been hungry and tired and thirsty in the desert." Chapter 18. After mustering the troops he had with him, David placed officers in command of groups of 1,000 and groups of 100. David then put a third part of the soldiers under Joab's command, a third under the command of Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and brother of Joab, and a third under the command of Ittai the Gittite. The king then said to the soldiers, "I intend to go out with you myself," but they replied, "You must not come out with us, for if we should flee, we shall not count. Even if half of us should die, we shall not count. You are equal to 10,000 of us. Therefore it is better that we have you to help us from the city." So the king said to them, "I will do what you think best." And he stood by the gate as all the soldiers marched out in units of 100 and of 1,000. But the king gave this command to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, "Be gentle with young Absalom for my sake." All the soldiers heard the king instruct the various leaders with regard to Absalom, "Be gentle, don't kill him." David's army then took the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest near Menahem. The forces of Israel were defeated by David's servants, and the casualties there that day were heavy, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the entire region, and the thickets consumed more combatants that day than did the sword. Absalom unexpectedly came up against David's servants. He was mounted on a mule, and as the mule passed under the branches of a large terebinth, his hair caught fast in the tree. He hung between heaven and earth while the mule he had been riding ran off. Someone saw this and reported to Joab that he had seen Absalom hanging from a terebinth. Joab said to his informant, "If you saw him, why did you not strike him to the ground on the spot? Then it would have been my duty to give you 50 pieces of silver and a belt." But the man replied to Joab, "Even if I already held 1,000 pieces of silver in my 2 hands, I would not harm the king's son, for the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai in our hearing to protect the youth Absalom for his sake. Had I been disloyal and killed him, the whole matter would have come to the attention of the king, and you would stand aloof." Joab replied, "I will not waste time with you in this way." And taking 3 pikes in one hand, he thrust for the heart of Absalom, still hanging from the tree alive. Next, 10 of Joab's young armor-bearers closed in on Absalom and killed him with further blows. Joab then sounded the horn, and the soldiers turned back from the pursuit of the Israelites because Joab called on them to halt. Absalom was taken up and cast into a deep pit in the forest, and a very large mound of stones was erected over him, and all the Israelites fled to their own tents. During his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it for himself in the king's valley, for he said, "I have no son to perpetuate my name." The pillar, which he named for himself, is called Yadaba Shalom to the present day. Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run to take the good news to the king that the Lord has set him free from the grasp of his enemies." But Joab said to him, "You are not the man to bring the news today. On some other day you may take the good news, but today you would not be bringing good news, for in fact the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed to Joab and sped away. But Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said to Joab again, "Come what may, permit me also to run after the Cushite." Joab replied, "Why do you want to run, my son? You will receive no reward." But he insisted, "Come what may, I want to run." Joab said to him, "Very well." Ahimaaz sped off by way of the Jordan plain and outran the Cushite. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and a lookout mounted on the roof of the gate above the city wall, where he looked and saw a man running all alone. The lookout shouted to inform the king, who said, "If he is alone, he has good news to report." As he kept coming nearer, the lookout spied another runner. From his place atop the gate he cried out, "There is another man running by himself." And the king responded, "He too is bringing good news." Then the lookout said, I noticed that the first one looks a lot like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. The king replied, He is a good man. He comes with good news. Then Ahimaaz called out and greeted the king. With face to the ground, he paid homage to the king and said, Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered upon the men who rebelled against my lord the king, who has delivered up the men who rebelled against my lord the king. But the king asked, Is the youth Absalom safe? And Ahimaaz replied, I saw a great disturbance when the king's servant Joab sent your servant on, but I do not know what it was. The king said, Step aside and remain in attendance here. So he stepped aside and remained there. When the Cushite came in, he said, Let my lord the king receive the good news that this day the Lord has taken your part, freeing you from the grasp of all who rebelled against you. But the king asked the Cushite, Is the young Absalom safe? The Cushite replied, May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rebel against you with evil intent be as that young man. Chapter 19. The king was shaken and went up in the room over the city gate to weep. He said as he wept, My son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son. Joab was told that the king was weeping and mourning for Absalom, and that day's victory was turned into mourning for the whole army when they heard that the king was grieving for his son. The soldiers stole into the city that day like men shamed by flight and battle. Meanwhile, the king covered his face and cried out in a loud voice, My son Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son. Then Joab went to his residence and said, Though they saved your life and your sons' and daughters' lives, also the lives of your wives and those of your concubines, you have put all of your servants to shame today by loving those who hate you and hating those who love you. For you have shown today that officers and servants mean nothing to you. Indeed, I am now certain that if Absalom were alive today and all of us dead, you would think that more suitable. Now then, get up. Go out and speak kindly to your servants. I swear by the Lord that if you do not go out, not a single man will remain with you overnight. And this will be a far greater disaster for you than any that has afflicted you from your youth until now. So the king stepped out and sat at the gate. When all the people were informed that the king was sitting at the gate, they came into his presence. Now all the Israelites had fled to their separate tents, but throughout the tribes of Israel all the people were arguing amongst themselves, saying to one another, The king delivered us from the clutches of our enemies, and it was he who rescued us from the grip of the Philistines. But now he has fled from the country where before Absalom, and Absalom, whom we anointed over us, died in battle. Why then should you remain silent about restoring the king to his palace? When the talk of all Israel reached the king, David sent word to the priests Zadok and Abiathar, Say to the elders of Judah, Why should you be last to restore the king to his palace? You are my brothers, you are my bone and flesh. Why should you be last to restore the king? Also say to Amasa, Are you not my bone and flesh? May God do thus and so to me, if you do not become my general permanently in place of Joab. He won over all the Judites as one man. And so they summoned the king to return with all his servants. When the king on his return reached the Jordan, Judah had come to Gilgal to meet him and to escort him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Barum, hurried down with the Judites to meet King David, accompanied by 1,000 men from Benjamin. Ziba too, the servant of the house of Saul, accompanied by his 15 sons and 20 servants, hastened to the Jordan before the king. They crossed over the ford to bring the king's household over, and to do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell down before the king and said to him, May my lord not hold me guilty, and may he not remember and take to heart the wrong that your servant did the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. For your servant knows that he has done wrong, yet realize that I have been the first of the whole house of Joseph to come down today to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, countered, Shimei must be put to death for this. He cursed the Lord's anointed. David replied, What has come between you and me, sons of Zeruiah, that you would create enmity for me this day? Should anyone die today in Israel? Am I not aware that today I am king of Israel? Then the king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king gave him his oath. Meribal, son of Saul, also went down to meet the king. He had not washed his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king left until he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why did you not go with me, Meribal?" He replied, "My lord the king, my servant betrayed me, for your servant, who is lame, said to him, 'Saddle the donkey for me, that I may ride in on it and go with the king.' But he slandered your servant before my lord the king. But my lord the king is like an angel of God. Do what you judge best. For though my father's entire house deserved only death from my lord the king, yet you placed your servant among the guests at your table. What right do I still have to make further appeal to the king?" But the king said to him, "Why do you go on talking? I say, you and Ziba shall divide the property." Meribal answered the king, "Indeed, let him have it all, now that my lord the king has returned safely to his palace." Barzillai, the Gileadite, also came down from Rogelim and escorted the king from the Jordan to the Jordan for his crossing, taking leave of him there. It was Barzillai, a very old man of 80, and very wealthy besides, who had provisioned the king during his stay at Mahanaim. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me, and I will provide for your old age as my guest in Jerusalem." But Barzillai answered the king, "How much longer have I to live that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I'm now 80 years old. Can I distinguish between good and bad? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks, or still appreciate the voices of singers and songstresses? Why should your servant be any further burden to my lord the king? In escorting the king across the Jordan, your servant is doing little enough. Why should the king give me this reward? Please let your servant go back to die in his own city by the tomb of his father and mother. Here is your servant, Shemam. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever you will." Then the king said to him, "Shemam shall come over with me, and I will do for him as you would wish, and anything else you would like me to do for you I will do." Then all the people crossed over the Jordan, but the king remained. He kissed Barzillai and bade him Godspeed as he returned to his own district. Finally, the king crossed over to Gilgal, accompanied by Shemam. All the people of Judah and half the people of Israel had escorted the king across, but all these Israelites began coming to the king and saying, "Why did our brothers and the Judites steal you away and escort the king and all his household across the Jordan, along with all David's men?" All the Judites replied to the men of Israel, "Because the king is our relative. Why are you angry over this affair? Have we had anything to eat at the king's expense, or have portions from his table been given to us?" The Israelites answered the Judites, "We have 10 shares in the king. Also, we are the firstborn rather than you. Why do you slight us? Were we not first to speak of restoring the king?" Then the Judites, in turn, spoke even more fiercely than the Israelites. Excuse me. This is a long one. Chapter 20. We're going to go over 20 minutes. All right, chapter 20. Now a rebellious individual from Benjamin named Sheba, the son of Bichri, happened to be there. He sounded the horn and cried out, "We have no portion in David, nor any share in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tent, O Israel." So all the Israelites left David for Sheba, son of Bichri. But from the Jordan to Jerusalem, the Judites remained loyal to their king. When King David came to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines whom he had left behind to take care of the palace and placed them in confinement. He provided for them but had no further relations with them. And so they remained in confinement to the day of their death, lifelong widows. Then the king said to Amasa, "Summon the Judites for me within 3 days. Then present yourself here." Accordingly, Amasa set out to summon Judah, but delayed beyond the time set for him by David. Then David said to Abishai, "Sheba, son of Bichri, may now do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your lord's servants and pursue him, lest he find fortified cities and take shelter while we look on." So Joab and the Kerethites and Pelethites and all the warriors marched out behind Abishai from Jerusalem to campaign in pursuit of Sheba, son of Bichri. They were at the great stone in Gibeon when Amasa met them. Now Joab had a belt over his tunic from which was slung in its sheath near his thigh a sword that could be drawn with a downward movement. And Joab asked Amasa, "How are you, my brother?" With his right hand Joab held Amasa's beard as to kiss him, and since Amasa was not on his guard against the sword in Joab's other hand, Joab stabbed him in the abdomen with it, so that his entrails burst forth to the ground, and he died without receiving a second thrust. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. One of Joab's attendants stood by Amasa and said, "Let him who favors Joab and is for David follow Joab." Amasa lay covered in blood in the middle of the high road, and the man noticed that all the soldiers were stopping, so he removed Amasa from the road to the field and placed a garment over him, because all who came up to him were stopping. When he had been removed from the road, everyone went on after Joab in pursuit of Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth Maachah. Then all the Bichrites assembled, and they too entered the city after him. So David's servants came and besieged him in Abel Beth Maachah. They threw up a mound against the city, and all the soldiers who were with Joab began battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman from the city stood on the outworks and called out, "Listen, listen! Tell Joab to come here that I may speak with him." When Joab had come near her, the woman said, "Are you Joab?" And he replied, "Yes." She said to him, "Listen to what your maidservant has to say." He replied, "I am listening." Then she went on to say, "There's an ancient saying, let them ask if they will in Abel or in Dan. Let them ask if they will in Abel or in Dan, whether loyalty is finished or ended in Israel. You are seeking to beat down a city that is a mother to Israel. Why do you wish to destroy the inheritance of the Lord?" Joab answered, "Not at all, not at all. I do not wish to destroy or ruin anything. That is not the case at all. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has rebelled against King David. Surrender him alone, and I will withdraw from the city." Then the woman said to Joab, "His head shall be thrown to you across the wall." She went to all the people with her advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. He then sounded the horn, and they scattered from the city to their own tents, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Joab was in command of the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Kerethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the chancellor. Shawashah was the scribe. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. Ira the Jairite was also David's priest. 23 minutes. Wow, this is a long week. It's a lot of history. It reads like a military history book, because that's what it is. I don't really have much in the way of comments to make. But as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or to text me. Next week finishes up the book of 2 Samuel. The better stopping point was right here and not a chapter ago, so that's why we went a little bit long this week. Hope you don't mind. But on that note, let us go ahead and fold our hands, bow our heads, and say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. All right, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.